All of the PowerPoint this morning has been and is going to be images, artistic images that represent people's understanding of the Trinity. The one for the message is I particularly like because it's kind of like somebody created an artistic vision of the three and then tore it in pieces, and yet it is still one piece. Because you can see the one piece, but you can also see the spaces. I just think it's kind of cool that that is actually what we say the Trinity is about. The three that are one and the one that is three. You can see why that caused a lot of very intense and complicated conversations. Because much like these short 3 verses of Scripture that I just read, you might have a tendency when you hear it to go, what? It's easy enough for us to say, yes, I get that. I've been going to church since I was a kid. I understand the Trinity is the three that are one and the one that are three. In fact, I can remember all those times that the minister had the kids sit at the front and did those things, where you pour the 3 things of sand and they mix together, the 3 that are one, but they're still 3. Or how about the trifoil, the 3-leaf clover, right? The 3 that are one, right? And yet they are still 3. The thing that we call, I think it's called a triquetra, I can't even pronounce it. The Celtic 3. It was on the very first slide this morning. We have all sorts of ways of symbolizing that 3 that are one and the one that are 3. Except how is that exactly? How is that? You can see why we would need to talk about it and why it becomes a doctrine. Nowhere in the Bible does somebody go, the Holy Trinity is this. In fact, there are indications that God's oneness is more than just one from the very beginning in Hebrew Scripture. But you can certainly see why other faith traditions, and in fact even some traditions within Christianity, don't understand what the point of that is. There are non-Trinitarian Christians. Why? Well, because if there is one God, there is one God, right? What more would you need than that? Why would you need to see that the one is more than one? Why can't we say, well, clearly, God, Jesus is a great teacher, and the Spirit is that sort of energy that, they're all separate, except they're not separate. And that's the point. They're not separate. They literally coexist. There's a fancy Greek word that they came to, homoousios. Rented lips this morning, I apologize. But the point is, what it means is, of one essence, but 3 persons. That's the Trinity. They are one, yet 3. So, for the next, probably 5 or 6 hours should give me enough time to cover at least a little bit of all of the theology and all of the things that have been written around this doctrine. Even within the United Church of Canada, this is a key piece of United Church of Canada doctrine. It shouldn't take, 5 or 6 hours maybe. Or you can go and read up on it yourself, because there are a bazillion books. They're all about 700 or 800 pages each. Because we talked about it a lot. Because you want to explain it. And this is why we often come to the idea that, okay, what's the simplest way that we can explain it? And then we try and demonstrate it with those things like the trifoil and all of those things. And sooner or later, someone's going to go, yes, but it's not that simple. Because it isn't. And yet we keep trying to explain it. Which is why we also sometimes come to the point where we go, it's a mystery. Now, the moment you hear the word mystery, you might be inclined to think what I mean is it's a puzzle that needs to be solved. And that's not what we mean. What we mean about it being a mystery is we mean it's a mystery in the same way that God is a mystery. Sometimes we just don't understand, we can't understand, and we're okay with that. We are going to instead wonder we're going to have awe, right? Not awe, but awe. It's amazing. See, I think the Trinity, this whole thing it's very much like, it's like light, right? You can see the source, and with the right equipment, you can scientifically explain light. In fact, you can even see it if you have the right lenses and the right technology and everything. But that's not the point, because the point is what it illuminates. What we can see because there is light. That's how we know there is light. We can see it. The things that are in it. In fact, sometimes the light can even cause us to have different perspectives on what we see. We can see from different angles. There are shadows. It gets very complicated suddenly, doesn't it? But the point is, it illuminates. And for me, that's what this is about. In fact, that's what most doctrine is about. Please feel free to spend a very long time looking into it, researching it, and studying it. There are people who have spent decades in universities doing just that, and thank goodness for them, because then they teach ministers and pastors who then share it with other people, who then share it with other people. Right? They've done all the hard work reading those 700 or 800-page books and spending hours researching it in order that they can share some of that wisdom, some of that wisdom, some of that wisdom that is meaningful to us in our daily lives. Your daily life probably doesn't need for you to spend 3 or 4 hours a day reading about the Trinity and other doctrines. But what if I told you, for me, what the Trinity illuminates is basically two things, and they are contrasting things. One is, I believe that God is in all things. So I have absolutely no difficulty whatsoever with accepting, whether I can explain it in less than 6 hours or not, that God is three persons and yet one essence. Because God is in all, God is in you, God is in me, God is in all living things. And we see that not just in the oneness that is God, but in how Jesus teaches us to live with each other, how Jesus shows us that that divine spirit is in each of us, and how we can live that out as part of this world, and how all things in this world are connected. And then the Spirit is that energy, that life energy that helps us live that out. That sounds very Trinitarian, doesn't it? So, first of all, I believe God is in all things, and the divine spirit is in us, and it's about how we live into that, how we learn to live into that, and then how we share that. Contrasting with that, however, the other thing that this illuminates for me is that we spent hundreds of years, and we're still talking about it now, trying to explain exactly what we mean by the Trinity. And it's not the only thing. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what that means, so that I can tell you this is exactly what that means. That is really super helpful when we're trying to make statements about who we are as a faith community. Sure, it absolutely is. But it's also been part of hundreds of years of separating us. Because in the early days when we were trying to figure this out, of course, we'd have conversations about it, and that would lead to a statement that it's this, and then someone else would say, no, it's this. And instead of saying, I see your point, let's have some more conversation about that, we'd go, no, you're wrong. We're going to start our own thing. And I'm being nice about that we're going to start our own thing, because you know as well as I do that in the earliest days, you would be declared a heretic, and that was very bad news for you, because you had to agree. We didn't have essential agreement in those days. I don't know if you're aware of this, but when you come into ministry in the United Church of Canada, you are required to do two things. One is you have to be on the pension plan. The other is, it's true, sorry. The other is you have to be in essential agreement with the basis of union. In other words, with the fundamental doctrine statements of the United Church of Canada. Essential agreement. Doesn't say you have to subscribe to them. It doesn't say you have to agree to them 100%. What it says is essential agreement. And the reason for that, I believe, the reason for that is that essential agreement allows for you to read something and go, I'm not in 100% agreement with your language, but I get what you're trying to say and I agree with that. Imagine how different all of our conversations about doctrine and the things that we believe and the things that are important to us, imagine how different those conversations would go if we all adopted a policy of essential agreement. Because then we can have a conversation with somebody where the thing that is separating us most is simply the words we're using. You've probably heard me say more frequently than lately, especially, however you know God, please join me in prayer. However you understand God to be, whatever language you use, I'm going to say God. But I want you to know that what I mean is, and then I'll talk about what I think God is. Imagine how different a lot of the conversations we've had would have been. A lot of those conversations that resulted in different denominations of the church. And this is the thing where I kind of go, this is a contrast too, isn't it? On the one hand, you want to say, why are there so many different churches? But on the other hand, I also want to go, wow, that's cool that there's so many different churches because we all come to God our own way and we can all find a way to connect with people who feel like we do. As long as that doesn't turn into those people down the street are wrong and don't have anything to do with them because they're wrong. They're going to the fiery pit. Wouldn't it be different if we could all say, I hear what you're saying, and this is how I would say that? Wouldn't it be different if we could say, I hear what you're saying, I think you mean this, am I right about that? And I don't agree with that 100%, but I see that it is helping you find your way to God. And there's the key part. We all come to God our own way. And if it is bringing us closer to God, why would you get to say it's not right? It might not be right for you, but it might be right for others. The key is it bringing me to God? Is it helping me to live? Whether it's Jesus that said it or somebody else, is it helping me to live out that divine spirit that is within me, that love and grace and compassion? Is it helping me to live that? Here's also the part where the Trinity for me is really an important piece of that, because what it's about is relationship. I was privileged yesterday to be the presider at Andrea Benoit's wedding. Some of you will know, might remember Andrea. People in Bashaw certainly will. And she and Sean got married yesterday. It was a beautiful ceremony. In that ceremony, there's a little piece, part of it says, you are about to enter into a relationship that is so intimate, it profoundly affects your whole being. I don't know who wrote that. It's from a prayer book. But whoever wrote that is profoundly brilliant. It's also about our relationship with God, too, isn't it? I mean, and you can see, at least in our understanding of what a marriage is about, it's a covenant. And it's not just a covenant but between two people, it's a covenant between two people with God. A relationship that profoundly affects your whole being. That's how intimate it is. That's the Trinity too. If you understand God as being not only the oneness that is everything, that life force that is everything, that creates and simply is from the beginning, because there's an energy in life, however you describe that, whatever language you want to use. But we who read the stories of Jesus and share the stories of Jesus, also understand that that is, as John put it, the Word made flesh. That is the person that we hear and tell the stories about that help us understand how that divine spirit is in us and how we can live it out, how love and grace and compassion can be in the world. And how we do that is empowered by that same spirit that is the oneness from the beginning. Right? So, why is that useful? Well, first of all, it ought to be super useful in terms of how we simply have relationships with each other and with creation. Let's not forget about creation. It's not just about you and me. It's about how we relate to the things around us. Of course it is. But it's not just about how we deal with each other personally, because we have gathered here in a United Church of Canada building. It's about how we are open to others and how we connect with others. It will probably not surprise you to know, and you may already know this, that one of the driving things behind creating the United Church of Canada in the first place, which, by the way, didn't spontaneously combust into existence in 1925, they started talking about it back in the late 19th century. It was decades getting there. But one of the driving things behind it was, we're all trying to minister to a vast area, Canada. We're all trying to minister separately. What if we got together? What if we got together and did it together? What if we pooled our resources? What if we shared things? Wait a minute. What if we connected? What if we created one? Allowing for the fact that we're all different, by the way. And that's the thing is, and if you're a historian who knows intimately the history of the United Church of Canada, please don't correct me in this moment, but wait until a little bit later so I can at least enjoy this a little bit more. I believe that one of the things also motivating those people who created the United Church of Canada was they didn't focus on how we were different. They focused on how we were not different. They focused on the things that we could connect on. They created a common ground of things that we could connect on and were positive about those things and how we connected on those things, and then said, let's also allow for the fact that we're different. In fact, we're going to put on our crest that all may be one. Understanding that what that means is the way Jesus, the way Jesus meant it, which is we are all different, and yet we are one in that we are all part of that oneness which is God, that life energy, that love, grace, whatever language you want to use, we are all one. But we'll allow for difference. And so we started, our secondary slogan started to be unity and diversity, because unity and uniformity are not the same thing. Unity allows not only for respect of diversity, but also for the engagement of it. So we build relationships. And then, not that long ago, we added, in Mohawk, we added to the crest the indigenous phrase, all my relations. Allowing for the fact that, in the great wisdom, in fact, that it's not just a question of that all of us may be one, but that all of creation may be one. So here's finally where I'm coming to with this. Just recently, Rising Spirit, the partnership of Ponoka United Church and Bashaw United Church, some of the people from the managing team of Rising Spirit started having conversations with other United churches in our area. And initially, part of that conversation was around technology and how we were using it, and that we were live streaming and all that, like between two places and how we do this thing. But then it broadened into how might we connect with others beyond just the two of our congregations. Maybe there's a way to create a Rising Spirit that is more than simply two partners. How might we do that? How might we engage other congregations that, again, we are one and yet we are different in so many ways. Also, let me just go one step further than that. Because I read yesterday or the day before a great story on CBC News about how in Brooks, Alberta, the United Church and the Lutheran Church have gotten together. They're working together. And that's not the only, they're all over the place, by the way, united in Lutheran congregations. There's united in Anglican congregations. People who have found a way to connect on their common ground and still honor the differences of their traditions. If we are not prepared to look at those things, we are simply endeavoring to survive as we are. And we will not thrive, we will not grow, if we are not open to others, and not just others who have difference of opinion on doctrine, but others who have a difference of opinion on many things. Because you cannot say we are all one family, except you people. You can't. Look at the Trinity. Look at the idea of relationship, of how we can be one and yet honor the diversity of that oneness. Look at the earliest days of the United Church of Canada. I can't imagine it just like appeared and suddenly everyone was super happy with that. Remember 1988? The church collectively made a decision on something. Not everyone was happy with that. It's not the only time. It's not the only time. But here's the thing. We are one. All my relations, we are one. As we go forward, how will we find a way to honor that? Not just honor that, but engage that. Think about how we grow and how we learn when we engage people, rather than simply say, I don't want to hear what you have to say, or, and this is the other thing, we're afraid of it. Once again, I'll remind you of the most frequently used words of Jesus. Don't be afraid. When we talk about the Trinity being a mystery, we don't mean it's a puzzle. We don't mean it's something you should be afraid of. When we talk about God and the oneness that is God, that is love and grace, it's not something you should be afraid of. And when Jesus says, don't be afraid, I think Jesus simply means, remember that whole oneness that is God and how the Spirit is in all of us? Remember how the Spirit empowers us to engage each other? Don't be afraid. Let's go and do that.